She only needed to rebuild her life after losing almost everything. He only wanted to help, the way any decent man would. But between baby bottles, improvised dinners, teasing moments in the kitchen, and a little girl who decided to adopt him before anyone else did, it became harder and harder to pretend it was only friendship. The smoke moved faster than the flames. That was the first thing Owen Patterson noticed when he stepped through the front door of the small two-story house on Maple Street. The hallway had already turned black, thick and low, pressing against the walls like something alive. He pulled the strap of his mask tighter and pushed forward. Behind him, Nashville was a wall of orange light. Sirens screamed into the December night. His captain shouted orders through the radio in his ear, but Owen was already counting doors. 3 on the right. 2 on the left. The neighbor had said a young woman lived here with a baby. That was all he needed. He kicked the second door on the right. It splintered open, and through the haze he saw her. She was on the floor by the bed, curled forward, her body folded over a small bundle pressed to her chest. Her hair was dark and tangled with sweat. Her shoulders shook. She was trying to breathe through a wet shirt held to the baby's face. Her own face was bare. She had given the baby every breath of clean air she could. Owen crossed the room in 3 steps. "Mom, I've got you." She lifted her head, and for 1 second, their eyes met through the smoke. Hers were wide, glassy, the green of something that grows back after a hard winter. She didn't speak. She just nodded fast, as if speaking would cost her air she didn't have. He pulled the wet wool blanket from his shoulder, wrapped them both inside it, and lifted her with the child still pressed to her chest. She weighed nothing. The baby was so small he could feel the curve of her back through the fabric, the shape of her little spine. "Hold on to her," he said low against her ear. "Don't let go." She didn't. He carried them through a hallway that was no longer a hallway, only walls of heat and falling pieces of ceiling. Twice he turned his shoulder to shield them from the embers. Once he heard the staircase groan behind them, and didn't look back. He had learned not to look back a long time ago. If this story is touching your heart, show your support. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends. Every action helps us keep bringing you new stories full of emotion. The cold air hit them at the front door like a slap. He carried them down the porch steps and across the lawn to the ambulance, and only when he set her on the stretcher did she finally let her body go. She slumped forward over the baby and started to cry. A quiet, exhausted crying. No sound at first, only her shoulders shaking. The baby, who had been silent the whole time, let out one small wail, then another. Owen took a step back. He should have moved on. There were hoses to run, walls to check, a ladder still leaning against the second floor. But he stood there for 1 extra second, watching the woman cradle the little one against her, watching the way her hand kept stroking the baby's hair, as if she needed to be sure she was still warm, still breathing, still real. Something pulled tight in his chest. He didn't know what to call it. "Patterson," his captain barked, "I need you on the line." He moved. By the time the medics took them, Owen was on a hose at the back of the house, soot in his throat, water freezing on his coat. He worked the rest of the night without stopping. He didn't talk much, he never did. The other guys joked that Patterson had 2 volumes, quiet and quieter, and that the only way to get a real sentence out of him was to ask about his mother's pot roast. But that night, even quieter than usual, he kept thinking about the way the woman had nodded instead of spoken, as if she had used up every word she had on the baby. When the shift ended near sunrise, the captain told him to go home, eat, sleep. Owen drove. He didn't go home. He went to the hospital. 3 miles away, in the bright fluorescent waiting area of Mercy General, Savannah Mitchell sat on a plastic chair with her sister asleep on her lap. Her throat hurt. Her eyes hurt. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking, and she couldn't tell if it was the cold or something else. The discharge papers were folded in her coat pocket. The nurse had said both of them were fine. Smoke inhalation mild. Nothing broken. Nothing burned. Nothing burned, Savannah thought. Except the house. Except every photograph of her parents. Except the rocking chair her mother had nursed her in, and then nursed Lily in 22 years later, when Lily came as the surprise that almost wasn't supposed to happen. Except the kitchen where her father had tried badly to teach her how to flip a pancake. 8 months. It had been only 8 months since the accident took both of them at once on the wet stretch of highway outside Knoxville. 8 months of holding herself and Lily together with tape and prayer. And now even the walls were gone. She pressed her lips to the top of Lily's head and breathed her in, baby shampoo, smoke, faintly, still, the sweet, milky smell of a 2-year-old who had cried herself to sleep. Where, Savannah thought, where on earth do I take her now? The automatic doors hissed open behind her. She didn't turn. She didn't know yet that the man who had carried them out of the fire was walking toward her across the linoleum, still in his coat, still smelling of smoke, still wearing on his face the look of someone who had not been able to leave without seeing them one more time. The chair beside her creaked. Savannah looked up, ready to tell whoever it was that she was fine. Thank you. She didn't need anything. The words were already half-formed when she saw him. She knew him by the shoulders first, wide, solid. Even out of the heavy coat, even sitting down, he took up a kind of space she wasn't used to. Then she knew him by the eyes, grey-blue, steady, set deep under dark brows. Tired eyes. The eyes of a man who had been awake longer than he should have been. You, she said. It wasn't a question. Me, he answered. His voice was lower than she remembered from the noise of the fire. Calmer. He had a slow way of speaking, like every word had to pass an inspection before it left him. My name is Owen Patterson, he said. Nashville Fire. I came on shift last night. I just wanted to make sure you and the little one were okay before I went home. Savannah swallowed. Her throat was raw. We're okay, she said. They told me we're okay. Good. He looked at the baby on her lap. The corner of his mouth moved, just barely. Not quite a smile. Something softer than that. Something more careful. What's her name? Lily. How old? 2. She turned 2 in October. He nodded once, slowly. Then he didn't speak for a moment, and Savannah was grateful for it, because if he had asked her one more gentle question, she might have started crying again, and she had decided in the ambulance that she was not going to cry in front of a stranger. But he didn't ask anything else. He just sat there. That was the thing that almost undid her, that he wasn't trying to fill the silence. After a minute he spoke again, quietly. Is there someone I can call for you? She shook her head. My parents passed 8 months ago. They were both only children. There's no one. Saying it out loud in a hospital lobby to a man whose name she had only just learned felt impossible. It felt like falling. But there was nowhere left to fall to, so she said it. Owen didn't say, I'm sorry. He didn't say anything for a while at all. He just shifted slightly in his chair, leaned his elbows on his knees, and looked at his own hands. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, practical. Do you have somewhere to sleep tonight? I'll figure something out. That's not what I asked. She lifted her chin. Owen could see the pride in it, the way she set her jaw, the way her shoulders went a little straighter, even though she had to be exhausted past speech. I'll find a hotel, she said. Let me drive you. You don't have to. I know. 3 syllables. That was all. But the way he said them made it clear he wasn't going to argue and he wasn't going to leave, and she could either accept the ride or sit in this lobby until morning. She looked down at Lily, at the small puff of dark curls, at the chest rising and falling against her arm, and something in her gave way. Okay, she whispered. In the truck, he turned the heat up before she could ask. He didn't make small talk. He didn't ask her where she'd grown up or what she did for a living, or any of the things people ask when they're trying to be kind. He just drove, hands steady on the wheel, eyes on the road. She watched the city slide by through the window. Christmas lights were still up on the houses. A man walking a dog. A diner with its lights on at 5 in the morning. There's a place on 8th, Owen said. Clean. Quiet. They'll have a crib if you ask. Okay. A pause. Listen, he said. I don't want to overstep. That seems unlikely from you. He glanced at her. It was the first time she'd tried, even slightly, to make a joke. The corner of his mouth moved again. Not quite a smile. Closer. There's an apartment next to mine, he said. The one across the hall. The owner is a buddy of my dad's. It just opened up. It's small. 2 bedrooms. Good light. He's a decent man. He won't gouge you on the rent. If you want, I can give you his number. No pressure. You take a couple days, you think about it. She turned her face fully toward him for the first time since they'd gotten in the truck. Why are you doing this? He didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on the road. Because you don't have anywhere to go, he said, and I'd want someone to do it for my mother. That was when she had to look back out the window, because her eyes were burning again, and she had decided, hadn't she, that she was not going to cry. At the hotel, he carried her one duffel bag, donated clothes from the Red Cross, a plastic-wrapped pack of diapers, and walked them to the door of the lobby. The night clerk slid a key across the counter without comment. When Savannah turned to thank him, Lily was awake. The little girl had been quiet on her sister's hip the whole walk. Her eyes were big and dark and a little glassy, the way they got when she was past tired. She looked at Owen. She looked at him for a long moment, and then she stretched both arms out toward him. Savannah felt her own breath catch. Lily didn't go to anyone. Not the neighbor, not the social worker, not even the kind nurse who had brought her juice. Lily clung to her sister the way a vine clings to a fence, always. Owen stood very still. "May I?" he asked Savannah, soft, like he was asking permission for something larger than this. Savannah nodded. She couldn't speak. He bent. He took the baby into his arms with a tenderness that didn't match the size of him. Lily settled against his shoulder, tucked her face into the side of his neck, and let out one long, sleepy breath. She had known him for less than a day. Savannah pressed a hand to her own chest, hard, as if she could keep something there from coming loose. She didn't know yet what was happening. She only knew her heart had grown warm in a way she hadn't expected. 2 days later, on a Tuesday afternoon that smelled like cold rain and exhaust, Savannah stood in front of a brown brick building on Cherry Street and tried to make her hand let go of the door handle of the cab. "Ma'am," the driver said. Sorry. She paid him. She got out. She held Lily a little tighter than she needed to. The building was 4 stories, sturdy, the kind of place that had probably looked exactly the same in 1962. A bakery occupied the ground floor. She could smell yeast and butter through the front window. A handwritten sign in the door said, "Bread until 6. After that, pray." Savannah almost smiled. She climbed to the 3rd floor with Lily on her hip. The hallway was narrow, the carpet soft. Apartment 3B had a small wooden sign painted with a sunflower. Apartment 3C, across from it, had nothing on the door at all, just a number. She knew without being told which one was his. She knocked on 3B. The owner, a man in his 60s named Walt, with a thick mustache and a baseball cap that had seen better summers, opened the door, took one look at Lily and said, "Well, come on in, sweetheart. Take a look. No rush." The apartment was small. 2 bedrooms, like Owen had said. A galley kitchen with white tile and a window over the sink. A little nook by the front window where you could put a desk. Wood floors. A radiator that clicked when it warmed up. It was nothing like her parents' house. That was, she realized, why she could breathe in it. "How much?" she asked. Walt named a number. It was lower than it should have been. She knew it was lower than it should have been. "Sir," she said carefully, "I appreciate it, but you don't have to. Patterson said you might say something like that." Walt scratched the back of his neck. "Look, ma'am, the boy down the hall has been a friend of my son's since they were 10 years old. He says you're family, so you're getting the family rate. And if you turn it down, you're going to make me feel bad in my own building." Savannah opened her mouth. She closed it. Lily reached up and patted her cheek with a small, sticky hand. "Mama Vanna," she whispered. It was her word for her sister, the one she had invented when she was 18 months old and confused about which one had the milk. Savannah looked down at her. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay." She signed the lease that afternoon. When she came back out into the hallway, the door of 3C was open. Owen was leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed in a grey t-shirt and jeans, no jacket. He had a dish towel slung over one shoulder. There was something cooking behind him. Onions, maybe. Garlic. She stopped walking. "You're home," she said, stupidly. "I live here," he said. The corner of his mouth did the thing again. The not-quite smile. "Did you take it?" "I took it." He nodded once, slowly. like he had already known the answer but was glad to hear it anyway. "When do you want to move in?" "Walt said the weekend works." "Saturday morning, then. I'm off." "You don't have to." Savannah. It was the first time he had said her name. He said it the way he did everything else, quietly, carefully, without showing his hand. "I'm helping, don't argue with me." She looked at him for a second longer than she meant to. His hair was darker than she'd thought when his face had been smudged with smoke, almost black, a little too long over the ears. There was a small scar through his left eyebrow, thin as a pencil line. She made herself look away. "Saturday," she said. "Thank you." Saturday came clear and cold. There were no boxes. That was the thing that struck her, standing in the lobby of the hotel that morning. Other people moved with U-Hauls and tape guns and friends complaining about pizza. She had 2 duffel bags, a stroller, a folded pack-and-play, and a paper grocery sack of donated baby supplies. That was all that was left of 26 years of a life. Owen pulled up to the curb in his pickup at 9 on the dot. He got out, walked around to the passenger side, and opened the door before Savannah could. He looked at the small pile of things on the sidewalk. He did not say a word about it. He just picked up the heaviest duffel, slung it over his shoulder, and reached for the pack-and-play with his other hand. "Lily, ride with you," he said. "I'll come back for the rest." There wasn't going to be any rest, he had to know that, but he said it like there would be, and somehow that was kinder than anything else he could have done. As if he were leaving her some dignity in a moment that didn't have much left. In the truck, Lily reached for him from the booster seat the second he climbed in. "Up," she demanded. "You're buckled in, Princess," Owen said. "I can't hold you while I drive." It was the first time he called her that. Savannah's chest did something strange and warm that she pretended not to notice, and busied her hands with Lily's mittens. By noon, the new apartment had a crib in the second bedroom, sheets on Savannah's mattress and a pot of soup on the stove that Owen had carried over from his side of the hall. He stood in the kitchen, hands on his hips, looking around like he was checking for something he might have missed. "You need a kettle," he said. "I have a kettle." "You have a saucepan." "That's a kettle." He looked at her. She looked at him. Lily, sitting on the kitchen floor with 2 wooden spoons, banged them together and yelled, "Bang!" Owen laughed. It was the first time Savannah had heard him laugh, and it changed his whole face, and she had to turn toward the sink so he wouldn't see hers. 3 weeks in, Savannah noticed she had stopped flinching at the sound of his key in the lock. That was the thing about Owen Patterson. He didn't move into her life. He just kept showing up. And at some point she had given him a key for emergencies, and at some point after that the emergencies had stopped mattering, and the key had stayed. He came over after shifts. She went over to his when her oven made a noise she didn't trust. They cooked. They ate. They washed dishes side by side at her sink, his elbow brushing hers, neither of them stepping back. January slid into February without either of them noticing. It started with the bottles. Lily had been weaning slowly off her bedtime bottle, but she still wanted one, and she still wanted it warm, and Savannah was the only person in the world she let give it to her, until the night Savannah was on a deadline. She had a chapter due to her editor by midnight, and the cursor on her laptop was blinking at her like an accusation, and Lily was tugging on the leg of her sweatpants saying, "Baba, Baba, Baba," in the voice she used when she was about to start crying for real. Owen was on her couch, boots off, reading the back of a hot sauce bottle for no reason. "Give her here," he said. "She won't. Try." Savannah handed Lily over. She handed over the bottle, still warming her own hand. She braced for the wail. Lily took one look at Owen, settled into the crook of his arm like she had been doing it her whole life, and opened her mouth for the bottle. Savannah watched. Owen leaned back into the cushions, shifted Lily a little higher, and started talking to her in a low, steady voice that Savannah couldn't quite hear. Whatever he said, Lily blinked up at him with her serious dark eyes, and after a minute, her lashes started to droop. He looked up. He caught Savannah staring. "Go work," he said, soft. "I've got her." She went. She wrote 2,000 words in an hour. When she came out of the office, Lily was asleep on his chest, the bottle empty on the coffee table, his big hand cupping the back of her tiny head. Savannah leaned in the doorway and pressed her fist to her mouth. She did not let herself cry. But oh, she wanted to. The nickname started without anyone deciding they would. Owen called Lily Princess. Not the princess, not little princess, just Princess, like it was her name. He said it when he came in the door. "Hey, Princess." He said it when she wobbled on her sturdy little legs across the rug. "Easy, Princess." The bear thing came later. Savannah had bought Lily a small brown teddy bear at a drugstore, the only stuffed animal that had survived their first week with no real possessions. Lily had named the bear in her 2-year-old way, Bear. She slept with Bear. She fed Bear oatmeal. She introduced Bear to Owen with a deeply serious expression the first night Owen came over for dinner. Owen took it from there. He came home from a hardware run with a small black and white stuffed panda. "Bear too," he said, handing it to Lily. He came home from a grocery run with a polar bear the size of a loaf of bread. Bear 3. By the end of the month, there were 5 bears on Lily's bed, and Lily had started calling herself Bear when she was in a good mood. "You're going to spoil her," Savannah said one night, watching Owen stack 2 more on the rocking chair. "That's the plan. She's going to think every man in her life buys her a bear. She's going to be right about one of them." Savannah turned to put the dishes away and pretended her face wasn't hot. Her own nickname for Lily had been there long before Owen. Flower. She had called Lily that since the night she was born, when their mother had handed the new baby to 24-year-old Savannah and said, "Meet your sister. Look at her. She's like a little flower." Their mother had been gone 7 months at that point. The nickname had stayed. The first time Owen heard her use it, he was carrying Lily in from the truck after a grocery run. Savannah had her arms full of bags. She held the door open with her hip and said, "Come on, Flower, we're home." Owen looked at her over Lily's head. "Flower?" he repeated like he was tasting it. "My mum started it. It fits her." He didn't say anything else. But after that, when he tucked Lily into her crib at night, Savannah heard him through the wall sometimes. Night Princess, Night Flower. Both names, both his now somehow without anyone deciding. Savannah, in her own bedroom on the other side of the wall, would lie in the dark and stare at the ceiling and tell herself, very firmly, that this was friendship, that this was kindness, that her landlord across the hall had simply turned out to be the most decent man she had ever met. She was an excellent writer. She was a terrible liar. Her best friend Ruth, who had known her since the 2nd grade and had no patience for anything, called on a Sunday morning while Savannah was making pancakes. "So," Ruth said, "how's the husband?" "He's not my—" "How's the husband, Savannah?" "Ruth, I swear to God." "Did he stay over last night?" "He went home at 10. On the couch or in your bed?" "Goodbye, Ruth. You are delusional. You are a delusional woman." "I'm coming over." She hung up. Savannah turned back to the stove. The pancakes were burning. She didn't notice. She was looking out the window at the cold blue morning and trying to remember the last time her chest had felt this loud. She couldn't. Behind her, the front door opened without a knock. Owen walked in, holding 2 coffees and a small white paper bag from the bakery downstairs. "Brought you something," he said. She turned around with the spatula still in her hand and the smell of burnt batter rising behind her, and she smiled at him like it was the easiest thing in the world. It wasn't. But she did it anyway. "You don't have to do this," Savannah said for the 4th time that morning. Owen kept his eyes on the road. The casserole dish was warm against her thigh. Lily was babbling in the back seat to a stuffed bear named, with great originality, Bear 4. "You said that already," Owen said. 3 times. 4. 4. And the answer is the same. My mother heard about you. She would like to meet you. She is not a woman you say no to." "I'm meeting your mother." "You're meeting my mother." Savannah looked down at the casserole, green beans she had insisted on bringing because she could not, would not walk into a stranger's home empty-handed, and felt her stomach turn over once. "Owen." What did you tell her about me?" He paused. The truck slowed at a stop sign. He looked over at her finally, and the look held a second too long for someone who was just answering a question. "That you were my friend," he said. "That you'd had a hard year. That you have the prettiest baby sister I've ever seen." "That's it?" "That's it." He turned back to the road. Savannah looked out the window so he wouldn't see her face do anything it shouldn't. His mother's name was Margaret. She was a short, sturdy woman in her early 60s, with silver hair pinned up in a loose knot and flour permanently on the front of her apron. She opened the door before they could knock, and the first thing she did was take Lily. "Oh," Margaret said. "Just that. Oh." She held Lily out at arm's length, looked her over once, and pulled her in tight against her shoulder. Lily, who took her time warming up to anyone, put both hands on Margaret's cheeks and said, "Hi." Margaret looked over Lily's head at Savannah, and her eyes were already wet. "Come in here, sweetheart," she said. "Get out of the cold." That was the whole introduction. The house smelled like rosemary and butter and wood smoke from the fireplace. Owen's father was Hal, broad in the shoulders like his son, retired from the post office, the kind of man who said 3 sentences a day and meant every one of them. He shook Savannah's hand, glanced at Lily and said, "She likes pears. She loves pears. Got pears." He went to the kitchen. Owen's older sister Diane was there with her husband and their 2 boys, both teenagers, both already squabbling over the last roll. There was an aunt named Connie who hugged Savannah without asking, and a cousin named Pete, who shook her hand and said, "Welcome to the circus, sister." By the time they sat down to lunch, Savannah had been hugged 6 times, handed 2 glasses of sweet tea, and been told by Connie that her hair was darling, in a tone that suggested Connie did not say that lightly. Lily was passed around the table like she was a baby they had all been waiting for. Savannah sat next to Owen and tried to eat. She kept watching him. She couldn't help it. Owen at his mother's table was a different man. Not louder, not different in any obvious way, but looser. The line of his jaw softer. He laughed twice at something his sister said. Once, when he reached for the salt, the back of his hand brushed Savannah's, and he didn't move it for a beat longer than he needed to. A small thing. She would remember it for weeks. In the kitchen after, Margaret took Savannah by the elbow. "Help me with dishes." It wasn't a request. The 2 of them stood at the sink together. Margaret washed, Savannah dried. Through the doorway they could see Owen on the rug in the living room with Lily, building a tower of blocks she kept knocking over with a delighted shriek. "He's good with her," Savannah said quietly. Margaret handed her a wet plate. "He's been good with kids since he was 12, she said. Held his sister's babies before they could hold their own heads. Strong hands, that one, always was. Yes. You know what else he's been since he was 12? Savannah looked up. Margaret was still scrubbing the same spot on the casserole dish, eyes on her work. "Slow," Margaret said. "Real slow with what he feels. He doesn't waste a feeling on anyone he's not serious about, never has." Savannah's hands went still around the plate. "Mrs. Patterson." Margaret, we're friends. He's been very kind. I don't want you to think, sweetheart." Margaret finally looked up. Her eyes were the same grey-blue as her son's. "I've known that boy 34 years, she said. "I know what he looks like when he cares about a roof. I know what he looks like when he cares about a person. I know what he looks like when he cares about his mother. And I know what he looks like right now." She turned the water off. "That's all I'm going to say about it." She dried her hands on her apron. She took the plate out of Savannah's frozen fingers. She gave her a look that wasn't quite a wink, more like a small private agreement, and walked out of the kitchen, humming. Savannah stood at the sink. She watched through the doorway as Owen lifted Lily over his head and made her squeal, and then settled her on his hip and turned by accident toward the kitchen. He saw Savannah. His face did the smallest thing, the corner of his mouth, the thing. She looked back down at the soapy water and tried to remember how to breathe. In the other room, Connie said loud enough for the whole house to hear, "Those 2 don't even know what they are yet, do they?" Hal, behind his newspaper, said, "Give them time, woman." And Margaret, passing through with a stack of clean cups, said, "Not too much." A storm rolled in on the 2nd Friday of February. Not snow. Nashville rarely got the kind of snow that mattered, but rain, hard and cold, the kind that hit the windows in slaps. Savannah had been in front of her laptop most of the day. Lily had been a tiny chaos demon since breakfast, refusing her nap, refusing her lunch, refusing anything that wasn't being held. By 6 in the evening, Savannah had given up on the chapter she was writing and was sitting on the kitchen floor with Lily in her lap, both of them sticky with mashed banana, when the front door opened. Owen walked in, shaking water out of his hair. He had a paper bag in one hand and a small bag of takeout from the Thai place down the block in the other. "Heard the screaming from the hallway," he said. "Brought reinforcements. She has refused to be a person today. Hand her over." Savannah handed her over. Lily, still mid-tantrum, looked up at Owen, took a deep, indignant breath, and put her thumb in her mouth and stopped crying. Savannah laughed. She didn't mean to. It came out of her like a hiccup all at once. "Traitor," she told her sister. "She knows quality," Owen said, and went to wash his hands. By 8, the apartment was warm and quiet in the way only an apartment can be when the rain is loud outside. They had eaten on the couch, plates balanced on knees. Lily fed first, and now happily smashing crackers into her high chair tray. Owen had put a movie on, some old western with John Wayne in it that Savannah hadn't seen since she was a kid in her father's lap. She didn't tell him about her father. Not tonight. Tonight she just curled into the corner of the couch with her socked feet pulled under her and let the movie play. Owen got up after a while. He came back with Lily's bedtime bottle, warmed in his own kitchen because hers was out of dish soap. He sat back down, lifted Lily out of the high chair, and arranged her in the crook of his arm with the quiet competence of a man who had been doing this for years. He had been doing it for 1 month. Lily took the bottle, settled in, and closed her eyes almost immediately. The little hand that always held the side of the bottle reached up and curled around Owen's thumb instead. Savannah saw it. Something inside her chest did a slow, painful turn. She didn't speak. Owen, for his part, was doing his best to keep his face in order. He could feel Savannah looking. He always could. He could feel it in the room the way you feel a draft. A small, quiet pressure, somewhere on the side of his face, that made him aware of every line of his own jaw. He kept his eyes on Lily. He focused on the shape of her tiny mouth around the bottle. He focused on the rise and fall of her chest. He focused very deliberately on not turning his head. If he turned his head, he was going to do something he wasn't ready to do. He felt the cushion shift beside him. Savannah moved. She moved closer, slowly, the way she would have moved toward a deer in a yard. And then, with a small nervous breath he heard but didn't acknowledge, she tipped her head sideways and rested it against his shoulder. Owen did not move. He did not move because if he moved she might decide it was a mistake and lift her head, and he wanted, he wanted, for it not to be a mistake. So he sat there, with a sleeping baby on his chest and a woman on his shoulder, and he let himself breathe very carefully in and out, while John Wayne shot at someone on the television and the rain hit the windows. He could smell her shampoo, something with vanilla, and something else, something underneath it that was just her. His thumb, the one Lily was holding, twitched once. That was the only crack he let show. Savannah, with her cheek against the cotton of his shirt, was somewhere between awake and asleep and didn't quite know which. She could hear his heart. It was steady, slow, the heart of a man who, she suspected, had to work to startle. Through her closed lashes she could see, blurry, the strong line of his forearm under Lily's small body. She could see the thumb that her sister had grabbed onto. His hand was big enough to swallow Lily's whole. She thought, this is dangerous. She thought, this isn't friendship. She thought, very small and very honest, I want to live here. Not in this apartment, right here, in this exact configuration, on this exact couch, with this exact man's shoulder under her cheek and her sister's small breaths rising and falling on his chest. She closed her eyes. She didn't move. Neither of them said a word. That was the strange thing. She had grown up in a noisy household. Her parents had filled silences with music or talk. Ruth filled silences with more talk. Most men she had met filled silences as if silence were a personal failure they had to fix. Owen didn't. He just was in a room. And the silence he made was a silence she could rest in. The movie ended somewhere around 9:30. Lily had been deeply asleep for an hour. Owen turned his head, finally, slowly, careful not to disturb either of them, and looked down. Savannah's eyes were closed. Her hand had curled in her sleep into the front of his shirt. He looked at her for a long moment. He didn't smile. He just looked, the way a man looks at something he hasn't been allowed to look at in daylight. Then he reached down, very gently, with the hand that wasn't supporting her sister, and pulled the throw blanket off the back of the couch and over both of them. He didn't move for another 2 hours. Outside, the rain finally slowed. Inside, on a worn couch in a small apartment on Cherry Street, 3 people who had not yet figured out what they were to each other slept anyway, leaning into each other in the dark, like they already knew. The book had been 76,000 words long the night the house burned. Savannah hadn't realized until 2 days later in the hotel that it was one of the only things she still had. The cloud had saved it. The cloud had saved her whole career, in fact. Every draft, every chapter, every messy comma she had ever typed for her editor in New York was sitting safe on a server somewhere, waiting for her to log back in. So she logged back in, and she kept writing. She wrote it in a coffee shop near the hotel for 3 days. She wrote it on Owen's couch the first week they were neighbors, while he made dinner across the hall and pretended not to notice she was working. She wrote it at her little desk by the window after the move, with Lily babbling on the rug behind her. The book was about 2 people who knew each other for a long time before they knew anything at all. She had not started it that way. She had started it 9 months ago as a novel about grief, about a young woman who lost her parents and inherited a sister who was barely old enough to walk. That part was hers. That part she had been writing through the worst of it, when writing was the only place her hands knew where to go. Then, in late January, the book changed. A man walked into chapter 22 who had not been in any of her outlines. He was a firefighter. He was quiet. He carried things without being asked. Savannah had stared at her own screen the night she wrote that scene and had said out loud to her empty apartment, "Oh no." Ruth came over on a Thursday afternoon and slammed the door behind her like a woman with information. "Okay," Ruth said. "I have been patient." "You have not been patient." "I have been patient, Savannah, like a saint. And now I am here to tell you that I drove past the bakery this morning, and your neighbor was buying bread, and I said hello, and he called me ma'am and Savannah. I am 31 years old. He calls everyone ma'am. He has 4 arms. Savannah laughed. She couldn't help it. Ruth was sitting on her kitchen counter. She always sat on counters. She had never sat in a chair in her life, wearing a coat she had borrowed from Savannah 3 years ago, and never returned. "Where's the baby?" Ruth asked. "Napping." "Where's the man?" "Working." "Where's the manuscript?" Savannah stiffened. Ruth's eyes narrowed slowly. "Savannah, it's not finished. You haven't let anybody read it, not even me. It's been 6 months. Are you writing dirt about somebody we know?" Savannah looked at her for a long second. "Oh my God," Ruth said. "Ruth. Oh my God, Savannah. It's fiction. You are a fraud and a coward, and I love you. Tell me when chapter 1 comes out so I can buy 17 copies. She got off the counter. She kissed Savannah on the temple. She left. Savannah sat down on her kitchen floor next to Lily's empty high chair and put her face in her hands. Owen had been asking to read it for weeks. He never asked twice. He was too patient for that. But every so often, when she was at her desk and he was at her counter slicing tomatoes, he'd glance over and say, "1 chapter?" And she'd say, "Not yet." That was their dance. Until that Saturday afternoon. Lily was down for a nap. The apartment was warm. Owen was on her couch in a flannel shirt with the sleeves pushed up, reading something on his phone. Savannah was supposed to be editing. She wasn't editing. She was looking at chapter 22. She didn't know why she did it. She would tell herself later that it was a small act of bravery, the kind a person makes when they don't fully realize what they're doing. The room had been quiet, and the light had been soft, and Lily had been breathing slowly through the open bedroom door, and she had felt safe in a way she had not felt safe in a long time. She closed her laptop on her finger to hold the page. She turned to him. "1 scene," she said. "If you want." Owen's head came up. He set his phone down without looking at it. "Yes. It's not finished. I'm not going to grade it." She opened the laptop. She cleared her throat. She read. She read about a woman who had been alone in a way that no one could see. She read about a man who walked into a hard night and walked out carrying her without asking why. She read about a friendship that became something neither of them had words for. She read 3 pages, careful, even-voiced, the way she would have read at a bookstore signing. Her hands were trembling slightly. She hoped he wouldn't notice. He noticed. She finished. She closed the laptop. She didn't look up. "It's the most special book I've ever written," she said quietly. "I don't know why." There was a long silence. She felt him shift on the couch. "Savannah." She looked up. His face was doing something. Not the not-quite smile. Something more careful, more held back. Something he was working to keep level. "That was beautiful," he said. "Thank you. Read me more sometime." "Maybe." He looked at her for 1 second longer than was strictly necessary. Then he picked up his phone again and pretended to scroll. She opened her laptop and pretended to edit. Neither of them admitted for one more day that the book was about them. That night, in his own apartment across the hall, Owen sat at his kitchen table for a long time, staring at a glass of water, thinking about the way she had said the most special book. He went to bed at 2 in the morning. He slept badly. He told himself he didn't know why. He did know why. The pasta water was already boiling when he came through the door. Savannah had her hair piled on top of her head, with a yellow pencil through it. An apron she had stolen from her mother's kitchen years ago tied around her waist, and Lily perched on the counter inside the curve of her arm. She was teaching her sister to stir. This was a generous description of what Lily was doing. What Lily was actually doing was holding a wooden spoon in one fist, smacking the side of a metal mixing bowl with great enthusiasm, and yelling, "Cook," every time the spoon hit something. "Your dinner is being assembled by a tiny barbarian," Savannah said over her shoulder. "Smells good anyway," Owen said. He took off his jacket. He hung it on the hook by the door. He had somewhere along the way started having a hook by the door. He came around to the kitchen, dropped a kiss on the top of Lily's head, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, and reached into the fridge for the bottle of seltzer he had started keeping there. Savannah pretended she had not seen the kiss. She had absolutely seen the kiss. She had felt every single thing about it, the casualness of it, the way he hadn't even looked at her while he did it, the way Lily lifted her face automatically to receive it, the way it implied that this was a thing they did now. She turned back to the pasta. "Sit," she said. 5 minutes. He sat on the stool across the counter from Lily. He set the seltzer down. He started pulling silly faces at her, wiggling his eyebrows, sticking his tongue out at the corner, making her laugh in that wet-throated baby way that came from deep in her chest. Lily, delighted, picked up her sippy cup of water. She looked at him with the eyes of a tiny scientist. She tipped it. A clear, cold rope of water arced from the cup across the counter and caught Owen square in the front of the chest. There was 1 second of absolute silence. Then Lily threw her head back and laughed like she had just invented humor. "Princess," Owen said. He was laughing too. "That was on purpose." "It was not," Savannah cried, half laughing, half horrified. "She doesn't have those kinds of motor skills yet." "She has exactly those motor skills." He looked down at his soaked shirt. The water had hit dead center, and the cotton was stuck dark to his chest. He sighed. He pulled the shirt off over his head. He didn't think anything of it. The shirt was wet. He needed a dry one. He had taken his shirt off in front of 100 guys at the firehouse 100 times, and his apartment was 12 feet across the hall, and he was not, in his own head, doing anything other than solving a wet shirt problem. What he was doing, in Savannah's kitchen, was a different problem entirely. She had picked up the wooden spoon to stir the sauce. She had turned around. She had seen. The spoon slipped out of her hand. It hit the tile floor with a clatter that was loud enough to startle Lily into hiccups. Owen turned at the sound. He took one look at Savannah's face, pink to her hairline, eyes very wide, mouth slightly open, and his own face did something he was not in time to stop. It split into a slow, helpless grin. "Savannah," he said. "What? You okay?" "I'm fine." "You sure?" "I'm fine, Owen." He bent down. He picked up the spoon. He handed it back to her. His knuckles brushed her wrist when he did it, and she flinched as if he had touched her with an iron. He saw the flinch. He was not going to mention the flinch. He was, however, going to mention a great many other things. "You were looking at me," he said. "I was not looking at you. You dropped a spoon. I drop things. You don't drop things. I dropped that thing." "Mm-hmm. Owen." "Yes. Go put on a shirt." He laughed. full, low, unguarded, the laugh she had only heard 1 or 2 times before. He raised his hands in surrender. "I'm going to get a shirt from across the hall," he said. "Otherwise this dinner isn't going to happen, and your sister is going to throw more water at me." "Yes, please do that. For the record." "What?" "You lie very badly." He walked to the door. He paused on the way out. He looked back over his shoulder at her, at the woman in her mother's apron with a yellow pencil in her hair and a baby sister on the counter. And the look he gave her was not the not-quite smile. It was something else. She did not know what to do with it. She turned back to the stove. She kept her eyes on the pasta. She told herself very firmly that she was a grown woman who had seen a man take off a shirt before. She told herself it didn't mean anything. She told herself a lot of things. The pasta boiled over. Across the hall, Owen leaned his forehead against his own front door. He was holding the wet shirt in one hand. His chest was still bare. The hallway was empty. He stood there for 10 full seconds with his eyes closed. He did not, as a rule, lose his composure. He was not a man who blushed. He was not a man who got rattled. He had pulled people out of burning buildings. He had testified at a fire commission hearing in a room full of suits without his pulse ticking up by a single beat. He was not, in any way, prepared for the way Savannah Mitchell looked when she dropped a wooden spoon. He pushed off the door. He walked to his bedroom. He pulled a clean T-shirt over his head harder than he needed to. In the bathroom mirror, he caught a glimpse of his own face. He did not recognize the man looking back. That man was smiling. He hadn't smiled at himself in a mirror since he was a teenager. He turned off the bathroom light. He went back across the hall to make sure her pasta hadn't burned. It had. He helped her start a new pot anyway. Neither of them said another word about the shirt. They did not need to. It was the kind of thing both of them were going to think about later, separately, in the dark. Spring came early to Nashville that year. By the second week of April, the dogwoods were already blooming, and the air through the truck window smelled like cut grass and somebody's charcoal grill, and Lily had named every dog she had seen from her car seat. Doggy. Yes. Doggy. Yes, Princess. Doggy Owen. I see him. Savannah, in the passenger seat, was holding a wicker basket on her lap and trying not to laugh out loud. She had packed enough food for 10 people. He had insisted. He had said you don't take a baby to a park without snacks for an emergency, and snacks for backup and snacks for the snacks. She had stopped arguing somewhere around the 4th round of crackers. The park was full of families. They spread an old quilt under a tree. Owen tossed Lily up in the air. She shrieked with the deep, wholehearted delight of a person who had no concept of being too cool for anything yet. Savannah lay on her stomach and watched them. She thought, "This is the kind of memory I'll have for 40 years. She did not write it down. She did not need to. She got up around 3 to go find ice cream. The little stand was on the other side of the playground, by the duck pond. She left Lily on the blanket, happily mauling a stuffed bear in the grass, and Owen stretched out beside her on his back, hands behind his head, eyes closed against the sun. Savannah walked across the grass barefoot, her sandals dangling from one hand. She didn't see the man until he was already next to her. He was tall, blonde, holding a bottle of beer in one hand, and very obviously not on his first. "Hey there, sweetheart." "No, thank you. I didn't ask you anything yet." "Whatever you were going to ask." "No, thank you." She kept walking, he kept walking. He said something about her hair, and something about her smile, and something about how she was too pretty to be at the park alone, and Savannah said, "I'm not alone." And the man laughed and said, "I don't see anybody." She felt her throat tighten. She had spent 20 years being polite to men like this. She was very tired of it. "Listen." "Sweetheart, just one drink." She did not get to finish her sentence. Owen was already there. She didn't know how he had crossed the grass so fast. She hadn't heard him. He was simply suddenly beside her, Lily on his hip, Bear 3 clutched in Lily's little fist, his other hand brushing the small of Savannah's back, as he stepped between her and the man. "Hey, love," he said. His voice was easy, calm. Savannah felt the word land somewhere below her ribs. "You okay?" he asked her. "I'm fine." He turned his head then. He looked at the blonde man. His face changed. Savannah had never seen Owen's face do this before. There was nothing dramatic about it. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't square his shoulders. He just looked at the man with a steadiness that would have stopped a wall. "My wife was being polite," he said. "I'm not going to be." The man's eyes flickered to Lily. Lily, who at that exact moment lifted Bear 3 over her head and whacked Owen with it. Owen didn't even blink. "Walk on," he said quietly to the man. The man walked on. It happened so fast, Savannah didn't entirely process it until she was already being steered gently by the small of her back toward the blanket. She made it 3 steps. "Owen Patterson. Don't. Owen. Savannah. Don't. You called me your wife. I called you whatever was going to make him leave. That's all it was. He set Lily down on the blanket. He didn't look at Savannah. He sat down on the corner of the quilt and ran a hand over his jaw. The hand was not entirely steady. That was what she noticed. His hand, that big, calm hand that could hold a fire hose and a sleeping baby and a coffee cup all at the same time without spilling a drop, was shaking very slightly, just at the wrist. She sat down across from him. "Hey," she said softly. "What?" Was that jealousy? He looked up at her. His eyes were the same grey-blue as the sky over the duck pond. He was trying very hard to keep his face still. "Eat your ice cream," he said. "I didn't get the ice cream." "Then I'll go get it." "Owen." "Savannah, please." She let him off the hook. She let him off the hook because she had heard the "please," and because she had felt the way his hand had landed on her back, and because she had seen the wrist shaking, and because she did not need him to say it out loud. She knew. Inside her chest, something quiet and joyful did a small, bright cartwheel. She turned her face into Lily's hair so he wouldn't see her smile. He, for his part, sat on the corner of the blanket with the sun warm on the back of his neck and tried to remember how to breathe like a normal person. He had nearly put his hands on a stranger. He never put his hands on anyone. He had stood in fires with his head clear. He had talked frightened children down off staircases without raising his voice. He had testified at a fire commission hearing in a room full of suits without his pulse ticking up by a single beat. He was not in any way prepared for what had happened to him in the grass when he saw the way Savannah's shoulders had gone tight. That wasn't jealousy. Jealousy was the small, manageable thing. What he had felt was something with teeth. She was his. The baby was his. He had not asked for the feeling. It had simply arrived, fully formed, like weather. It scared him. He stood up. He walked to the ice cream stand. He came back with 2 cones, strawberry for her, chocolate for Lily, and didn't get one for himself. His hands were finally steady again. He sat down on the blanket beside the woman he had just called his wife in front of half a city park, and he did not say a single word about it for the rest of the afternoon. He didn't need to. She kept catching him looking. Every time he looked, the cartwheel inside her chest did another small, bright turn. Savannah knew before she touched her. She had been Lily's sister mother for 8 months. She knew the way the baby breathed in the dark. She knew the difference between a deep sleep and a restless sleep, between a dream and a fever. That night, Lily breathed wrong. It was almost 3 in the morning. Savannah had gone to bed at midnight. Owen had stayed for dinner and then gone home at 10 to sleep before a shift. The apartment was quiet in the way it only got when something was about to happen. Savannah pushed the covers off. She walked to the nursery. The light from the hallway fell across the crib in a long pale bar. The baby was on her back, cheeks pink, mouth slightly open. Savannah leaned in. She put 2 fingers on the side of Lily's neck. Warm. Too warm. She got the thermometer. 101.4. She let out a slow breath. She had been a nursing major for 6 months in college before she switched to English. She knew this number. 101.4 was nothing. 101.4 was a normal toddler running a normal low-grade fever. For any one of 50 normal reasons. You gave them children's Tylenol. You watched them. You took them to the pediatrician in the morning if it didn't break. This was not an emergency. She knew this was not an emergency. She was halfway through the bottle of Tylenol, measuring it carefully into the little dropper, kissing the top of Lily's head, murmuring, "It's okay, Flower, you're okay," when there was a knock at the front door. Soft, 3 taps. She knew who it was before she opened it. Owen was standing in the hallway in sweatpants and a t-shirt. His hair was sleep mussed. There was a crease across one cheek from a pillow. He had not bothered with shoes. "Heard the cabinet," he said. "You heard my medicine cabinet from across the hall?" "Light sleeper." "Owen, it's almost 3. Is she okay?" "She has a fever. It's low. It's normal. Go back to bed." He didn't move. He looked at her standing there in flannel pajamas with the thermometer still in her hand, and then he looked past her, into the apartment, toward the nursery. "Let me see her." "Owen, Savannah." She stepped aside. He walked straight to the crib. He didn't pick Lily up. He didn't even speak. He just stood there looking down at the baby and put the back of his big hand against her forehead the way Savannah had seen Margaret do at the Sunday lunch. He was quiet for a long moment. "Hospital," he said. "What?" "We should go to the hospital." "Owen, no, it's a low fever. It's not even 102. The pediatrician's office opens at 8. I'll take her then." "I'd rather take her now." "You would rather drive a sleeping toddler to the emergency room at 3 in the morning for a 101 fever?" "Yes. Why?" He looked at her. He didn't answer right away. He scrubbed a hand through his already messy hair. He turned away from the crib so that Lily wouldn't hear them, even though Lily was asleep. He spoke quietly. "Because if it was your kid," he said, "you'd want someone to drive you." That was when something in Savannah cracked. Not broke, not all the way, but cracked. She had been all night the strong one. She had been for 8 months, the strong one. She had been the woman who held the baby and signed the paperwork and read the books on toddler illnesses and figured out the car seat by herself in the parking lot of a hardware store. She had not had anyone in 8 months knock on her door at 3 in the morning because they had heard a cabinet. She made a small, wet sound. She did not cry. Almost. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay. We'll go." The on-call pediatrician at Mercy General was a woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a chain. She listened to Lily's chest. She looked in her ears. She felt the sides of her neck. She did everything carefully and patiently, and at the end of 7 minutes she peeled off her stethoscope and looked at Savannah. "Mom is right," she said. "Low grade, probably teething. Tylenol every 4 hours. She'll be fine by morning." "Thank you," Savannah said. "Dad—" "Oh, he's not—" "Dad," the doctor said again, ignoring her. "You did the right thing bringing her. Always bring them when you're not sure, especially the little ones." Owen nodded once. "Yes, ma'am." He didn't correct her either. In the truck on the way home, the sky was still black. Lily was asleep against Owen's chest in the carrier. Her little fist was curled in the front of his t-shirt. She had been asleep for the entire visit, every cool stethoscope and every cold light, the way only a baby with a low fever and a sense of safety can sleep. Savannah looked at them. She looked at the size of his hand cupping the back of Lily's head. She looked at the way his other hand held the wheel. Steady now, calm now, the wrist not shaking. She did not say anything for the whole drive. When they got home, when he laid Lily back in the crib and pulled the blanket up to her shoulders, when he turned to leave, Savannah caught his sleeve at the door. She didn't pull. She just held. "Owen." "Yeah." "Thank you." He looked down at her hand on his sleeve. He didn't move. "For driving us," he said. "For more than that." He looked up. There was a long moment in the dim hallway with the nursery light spilling soft yellow behind them and Savannah's hand still curled in the cotton of his sleeve and his eyes very quietly on her face. He didn't kiss her. She thought for one breath that he might. He didn't. He lifted his other hand instead, slowly, and tucked a piece of her hair behind her ear with the side of his thumb. The thumb stayed for a half-second too long against the place behind her jaw. Then he stepped back. "Get some sleep," he said. "I'll come over in the morning." "Owen." "Savannah. Good night." "Good night." She closed the door. She leaned her forehead against the wood. She stayed there with her hand still on the doorknob for a long time. The last barrier was not a barrier anymore. She didn't even pretend. Across the hall, Owen sat on the edge of his bed in the dark and pressed his palms flat against his knees to keep them still. He had almost kissed her. If she had said one more word, if she had not said his name like that, he had been, all night, doing the same thing he had been doing for months, proving with his hands that he was a man worth trusting, proving by showing up, proving by being there at 3 in the morning when nothing was even wrong. He could not, would not, kiss her on a night when she was tired and frightened and grateful, not because he didn't want to, because he did. He lay back on the bed in his clothes. He stared at the ceiling. He didn't sleep. It took him 3 stores. This was in itself ridiculous. Owen Patterson had once cleared an apartment building of 14 tenants in 7 minutes flat. He had passed his lieutenant's exam on the first try. He could fix a transmission, change a tire in the rain, and grill a steak so it hit the plate at exactly the right pink. He could not, it turned out, walk into a baby clothing store and pick out one outfit. The first store had not had bears. The second store had had bears, but the bears looked angry, and he had stood in front of the rack for 10 minutes deciding that no almost niece of his mother's was going to wear a teddy bear with a grudge. The third store on a side street in East Nashville had exactly what he was looking for. The hood had little round ears. The mittens were shaped like paws. The body was the soft caramel brown of a real teddy bear, the kind he remembered his sister having when they were kids. The cashier at the register had taken one look at him, 6 feet of Firefighter, hands the size of dinner plates, holding a tiny brown onesie with 2 paws sticking out, and laughed out loud. "For your daughter?" she asked. "Almost," Owen said. He didn't explain. He paid in cash. He drove home. He carried the bag up 3 flights with a kind of nervous, sheepish energy he hadn't felt since he was 16. He knocked on Savannah's door. She opened it with flour on her cheek. He held up the bag. "Don't be mad," he said. "What did you do?" "I bought her one thing." "Owen, one thing. The last one thing you bought her was 3 teddy bears in 3 different sizes. This is one thing." She let him in. Lily was on her playmat building a tower of soft blocks. Owen sat down on the floor with the bag like it was a magic trick. He pulled the onesie out slowly. He held it up. Lily saw it. Lily said, very loudly and with great religious conviction, "Bear." Savannah covered her mouth with one hand. She had not yet decided whether she was going to laugh or cry. Both options were on the table. Owen unzipped the onesie with the focus of a man defusing something. He picked Lily up. He set her on her feet. He fed one little leg into the suit, then the other, then her arms, and then, carefully like he was wrapping the most precious package in the world, he pulled the hood up over her dark curls. The little ears stood up on top of her head. Her face peeked out of the soft brown circle. 2 tiny paws hung off the ends of her arms. She blinked. Owen made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh and wasn't quite a groan. "Savannah." "Don't start." "Savannah." "Owen, look at her." Savannah looked. She had no defenses. Lily, in a teddy bear suit, looked exactly like a small, confused teddy bear who had recently learned to walk. She lifted one paw. She inspected it. She turned it over. She then attempted to put the paw in her mouth, discovered it was a paw, and gave Owen a deeply offended look. He picked her up. He turned to Savannah. He was openly, helplessly delighted. "Tell me," he said, "tell me to my face that this isn't the best thing you've ever seen. You are exaggerating." "I'm not exaggerating, I'm reporting." "Owen, tell me." Fine. Fine. It's the cutest thing I've ever seen. Are you happy?" "Very." He kissed the top of Lily's hooded head. Savannah's chest did the thing it had been doing for months, that slow, painful turn behind the ribs. She walked over to wipe down a counter that did not need wiping. 2 hours later, they were at the mall. Owen had insisted. He had said that since the bear suit had been such a runaway success, it was, in his words, irresponsible not to investigate. Savannah had pointed out that nothing about this was irresponsible. Owen had pretended not to hear her. Lily, still in the bear suit, was riding on his hip into the children's clothing section, like a small fuzzy princess inspecting her kingdom. He was unstoppable. He picked up a fox onesie. "Look at this, princess." He picked up a frog onesie with little webbed feet on the hood, Princess, princess, look. He found a panda. He found a lion with a tiny mane. He found, last and most fatally, a small spotted cow with horn nubs on the hood. And at that point, Savannah sat down on a display bench with her hands over her face. Owen Patterson. You have 5 animals. 6. Owen. Look at her in the cow. He held it up against Lily's tiny back. He turned so Savannah could see. Lily, who had been in the bear suit for 2 hours and had decided this was just her life now, gave the cow a deeply suspicious look and then patted it. Pat, she announced. Savannah laughed until her eyes watered. Owen, watching her laugh, paid for the cow. He paid for the cow and the fox and the frog and the panda and the lion, all 5 at once, while the cashier looked at him the same way the woman in the East Nashville store had looked at him. He didn't explain anything to her either. He was not, in any moment of any day for the rest of his life, going to apologize for spoiling Lily Mitchell. He was, however, going to start budgeting for animal onesies as a recurring expense. In the truck on the way home, Lily fell asleep in her car seat with one paw under her chin. Savannah turned to look at her. Then she turned to look at the man driving. He had one hand on the wheel and one elbow on the door. He had not said anything for 10 minutes. The setting sun was behind him, gold through the window, and she could see the line of his profile, the strong nose, the slightly crooked mouth, the small white scar on his left eyebrow she had memorized without meaning to. He glanced over. He caught her looking. He didn't say anything. He just reached across the console with his right hand, palm up, and left it there in the space between them. Savannah stared at the hand. She put her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers. He did not look at her. He drove the rest of the way home like that, with her hand in his, in absolute silence. Neither of them said a word about it when they got out of the truck. They didn't need to. It was the kind of thing both of them would think about separately all night. The firehouse on Tuesday night smelled like coffee and motor oil. It was the slow shift. The trucks were quiet. The other guys were watching a basketball game on the common room TV with the volume too low. Owen was at the long metal table near the window, supposedly doing paperwork, in fact pushing the same incident report around with a pencil for the 3rd hour. He was thinking about her. This had been happening more. He had run out of polite ways to say it, even in his own head. He thought about her in the truck on the way to a call. He thought about her at the gym, lifting weights he didn't need to lift, just to keep his hands busy. He thought about her at 3 in the afternoon when he was supposed to be checking the hose pressures. He thought about her right now. The phone in his pocket was a small, dangerous weight against his thigh. He told himself he was not going to call. He told himself that for 10 minutes. Then he picked up the phone, walked out of the common room into the empty hallway by the bunk room, leaned against the brick wall, and tapped her name. It rang once, twice. Her face appeared on the screen. She was on her couch. The lamp behind her was on, soft and yellow. Her hair was in a loose braid over one shoulder. She had a book open in her lap. She was barefoot, with her feet tucked up under her, and Lily was beside her on the cushions in pajamas. Pajamas that, Owen noted with personal satisfaction, were one of the animal onesies. The fox. He didn't say anything for a second. He just looked. "Owen," Savannah said. "Hey, is everything okay?" "Everything's fine." She tilted her head. She knew by now the difference between fine and fine. He could see her cataloguing which one this was. "Are you eating?" she asked. "No." "Owen, there's chili. Eddie made chili. I'll get to it." "Eddie's chili is questionable. Eddie's chili is criminal, but it's hot." She laughed. The laugh did something to him. He pressed his shoulder a little harder into the brick. Lily, hearing his voice, looked up from where she had been gnawing on the corner of a stuffed animal. Her whole face changed. Her dark eyes lit up. She reached for the phone with both small hands. "Owen? Hey, princess." "Owen? I see you. I see you, princess," she squealed. It was a deep, real, unself-conscious squeal of delight, the sound a small person makes when their favorite person has appeared in a place they did not expect. She tried to grab the phone. Savannah, laughing, held it just out of her reach. "You broke her," Savannah said. "She's going to expect this every shift now. That's the plan." It came out softer than he meant it. She heard it. He saw her hear it. She didn't make a joke. She didn't deflect. She just looked at him through the screen for a long moment, and her face went a little quieter, and she said simply, "We miss you." He had to look away. He was a grown man on a Tuesday night in the hallway of a firehouse, and his mouth had gone dry. "I miss you too," he said. "How long is your shift?" 12 more hours. Will you eat the chili? For you, yes. Owen. Yeah. Be safe tonight, okay? Yeah. I mean it. I know. He didn't want to hang up. He stood there with the phone tipped against his cheek, watching her watch him, watching Lily wave a small fuzzy paw at him from the couch, and he understood, with a quiet, clean kind of certainty, that he was going to spend the rest of his life trying to come home to that couch. He hadn't said it yet. He didn't say it now, but he knew. "Good night, love," he said. "Good night, Owen." He hung up. He stood in the hallway for another minute. Then he went and ate Eddie's chili. Across the city, on her couch, Savannah set the phone face down on the coffee table and put both hands flat over her face. He had called her love. He had called her that at the park, with a stranger watching, where it could pass as a performance. She had told herself for 2 weeks that that was what it had been. He had just called her that again. In the dark, on a phone, with no one watching, in a voice softer than she had ever heard him use about anything. It hadn't been a performance. She kept her hands over her face for a long time. She didn't realize she was crying until Lily climbed into her lap with a small fuzzy paw and patted her cheek. "Mama Vanna," the fox said, concerned. "I'm okay," Savannah whispered. "I'm okay, Flower." She tucked Lily under her chin. She rocked her very gently, as much for her own sake as the baby's. She thought, "I love him." She thought, "I have for months." She thought, "What on earth am I going to do with that?" The phone on the coffee table buzzed once. A text. From him. 2 words. "Sweet dreams." She pressed the phone to her chest and laughed, helpless, in the lamplit quiet of the apartment, with a fox baby on her shoulder, and a heart that had finally stopped pretending. She did not write that night. She had been writing every night for months, sometimes until 2 in the morning, the book that was about them growing in her laptop like something with a heartbeat of its own. Tonight, she closed the laptop. She put Lily down in the crib in her fox suit, because Lily refused to be removed from it under any circumstances. She kissed her forehead. She turned out the light. She lay in her own bed and listened to the apartment. She listened for the sound of his door across the hall, the way she did some nights without admitting to herself that she was doing it. His door, of course, did not open. He was at the firehouse. She rolled onto her side. She pressed her face into the pillow that smelled faintly of him, because he had napped on this bed once 2 weeks ago after a long shift, and his cologne lived in the cotton now whether she liked it or not. She liked it. She closed her eyes. She thought very simply, "Please be safe tonight." In the firehouse on the other side of town, his pager went off at 1 in the morning, and he was up and in the truck inside 90 seconds, and he came home in the morning with soot on his jaw and a dent in his composure that no one but Savannah Mitchell would ever have noticed. She noticed. She didn't say anything about it. She handed him a coffee. He drank it. That was their morning now. She had not worn a dress in 15 months. The last one had been the black sheath at her parents' funeral. After that, dresses had felt like a language she could no longer speak. Tonight she pulled one out anyway. It was cream-colored, sleeveless, with a small belt at the waist. Ruth had brought it the week before, dropped it on the bed and said if Savannah was going to dinner with the man across the hall, she was doing it in something other than a sweater. She put on her mother's small gold earrings, the only thing of her mother's saved by a safe deposit box at the bank. She looked in the mirror. She looked, she thought, like a woman about to do something brave. She did not know yet how brave. Owen was at her door at 7. He took one look at her in the cream dress, and his face did something he could not get under control in time. He didn't try to hide it. "Savannah." "What?" "Nothing." "You're staring." "Yes." He didn't say sorry. She stepped past him with Lily on her hip in a small green dress. He followed her down the hall, not looking away from her once. The restaurant was small and warm, with low light and white tablecloths. They got 6 steps inside before a woman called his name. She was tall, sleek dark hair in a black dress designed for being noticed. She was smiling at Owen in a way that did not include Savannah at all. Patterson. Tasha. She came over. She put a hand on his arm. Her eyes did the polite up and down of a woman cataloguing a competitor. Who's this? This is Savannah, Owen said. My friend and her sister, Lily. The word friend landed in Savannah's chest like a small, cold stone. We should grab a drink sometime, Tasha said. Catch up. I'm always at the firehouse. That wasn't what I meant. She smiled. She walked back to her table. Owen opened his mouth, but Savannah was already moving toward their booth. Lily pressed tight to her hip, her face composed as glass. She did not cry in restaurants. She had decided about restaurants a long time ago. She was quiet through the soup, quieter through the entree. By dessert, Lily had crawled into Owen's lap with a half-eaten bread roll, laid her head against his chest, and fallen asleep with her little fist still clutching the bread. Savannah looked at them, her throat closed. Savannah. What? Talk to me. I'm fine. You haven't said 10 words. Owen, can we just go home? He nodded. He paid. He carried Lily out asleep on his shoulder. The drive home was the first silence between them that ever felt heavy. He laid Lily in the crib. He came back out. Savannah was at the window, arms wrapped around herself, her back to him. Savannah. Don't. I'm not leaving until you tell me. She turned around. Her eyes were wet. Her chin was set. He had seen that expression once before, 8 months ago in a hospital lobby, when she told him she had no one left to call. I fell in love with you, she said. He went still. I have been falling for months. I told myself I could keep it inside. Tonight I watched a woman put her hand on your arm and I couldn't breathe. And the worst part is Lily loves you, and if this ends, I have to watch her lose you too. He crossed the room in 3 steps. He put both hands on her face. I have loved you since the hotel, he said. She made a sound, half a sob, half a laugh. Since the hotel? Since she put her arms out for me. Owen. I waited because I needed to prove it with my hands, that I could be the man for both of you, that I would raise her like she was mine because she is. She has been since that first night. He kissed her. He kissed her the way a man kisses a woman after 8 months of holding still, slow, careful, deep. She tasted the wine from dinner on him and something underneath it that was just him. She felt his thumb against her jaw and his other hand at the small of her back, and she made a small sound against his mouth that she did not recognize as her own. He pulled back half an inch. Be mine, he said. Yes. Officially. Yes, Owen. He kissed her again. That night, after Lily was asleep, after the apartment was dark, the bedroom door closed behind them. He held her close with hands steadier than hers. He kissed the place behind her ear. He whispered her name once, like a word he had been holding for months and was finally allowed to say. What happened between them that night was a beautiful promise of a new beginning, quiet, slow, and deeply felt. She would remember for the rest of her life the way he kept his hand on her cheek the whole time, as if she might disappear, as if he could not believe she was real. She was real. She fell asleep against his shoulder. He did not sleep at all. He was too busy listening to her breathe. The ring lived in his sock drawer for 9 days. He didn't know what he was waiting for. He had picked it out the first month. A small square stone in a thin gold band, the kind of ring she could wear while she typed. He had carried it home from the jeweler in his coat pocket and put it in the drawer behind the rolled-up wool socks he never wore. For 9 days he opened the drawer to look at it like a man checking on a fire he had built. On the 10th day he closed the drawer, picked Lily up off the rug. She was in a panda onesie that was getting too small at the wrists, and walked across the hall. Savannah was at the kitchen counter making tea. He set Lily down on the counter beside her, the way he had 100 times. He went down on one knee. Savannah dropped the tea bag. Owen. Savannah Mitchell. He took her left hand in his free hand. Lily on the counter watched all of this, and then, with the hard-earned wisdom of an almost 3-year-old, she stretched both small arms out toward him, the same way she had on a hotel doorstep 18 months before. He let go of Savannah's hand for 1 second. He picked Lily up. He held her against his side as he lowered himself back onto one knee with the ring still in his other hand. "I came into your life on the worst night of it," he said, "and you let me stay. You let me hold this baby. You let me pack snacks and buy onesies and pick spoons up off your kitchen floor. I have been a happier man in the last 4 months than I knew it was possible to be." He paused. "Marry me," he said. "Both of you." She was crying, quietly. Just tears. She looked at Lily. Lily looked at Owen. Lily, leaning her head against his neck, lifted one panda paw and patted his cheek. "Owen home," she said. It was the only answer that mattered. Savannah whispered, "Yes." He slid the ring on her finger. 2 cups of tea steeped on the counter behind them. They would be cold by the time anyone remembered. They were married 2 months later, on a clear October afternoon, in Margaret and Hal's backyard. It was small, family only. 20 people in folding chairs under the elm tree, a string quartet that had been Diane's idea, and Ruth bawling openly into a handkerchief from the front row. Savannah wore a soft champagne-colored dress that fell to her ankles. She carried a bouquet of white peonies tied with twine. Lily was the flower girl. She wore the bear suit. Savannah had argued with Owen for 3 weeks about this. Owen had not budged. Margaret had finally settled it. "Let the child be a bear, sweetheart." So Lily walked down the aisle in a white tulle skirt over the bear suit, scattering rose petals and yelling "petal" every time she dropped one. Owen, at the altar, watched her come and then watched Savannah behind her, and the not-quite smile on his face cracked finally, fully, all the way open. He was openly grinning when his bride reached him. When they kissed, Lily, in the bear suit, climbed up onto his shoe to be included. He picked her up without breaking the kiss. The string quartet pretended not to laugh. A year later, Savannah was 7 months pregnant and standing in the kitchen of a small house with a wide front porch on the edge of town. The kitchen smelled like onions. Owen was at the stove. Lily, almost 4 now and talking at full speed, was running through the living room in a giraffe onesie that was getting tight in the legs. He turned around. He saw his wife with one hand on the small of her back. He set the spoon down. "Sit down." "I'm fine." "Savannah Patterson. Sit." "I am making dinner." "You are not making dinner." "I am." "You sit. You put your feet up." "Owen, I'm getting the footstool." "Don't get the footstool." He got the footstool. She rolled her eyes. She sat. He kissed her temple on the way back to the stove, the same way he had kissed Lily's head 100 Tuesdays ago. Lily came running in. She was holding the new book. It had come out 3 weeks before. Hardcover, Savannah's name on the spine in clean white letters. On the dedication page, a single line. Owen had read it for the first time the morning the box of author copies arrived. He had been at the kitchen table with his coffee. He had read it once. He had read it again. He had set the book down. He had not been able to speak for a full minute, and his wife had walked over and laid her hand flat on the back of his neck and said nothing. The dedication read, "For the man who answered the call on my darkest night and gave me back my life." He had cried. He was not a man who cried. He cried. In the kitchen of the small house at the edge of town, on a quiet Thursday in October, Owen Patterson stirred a pot of soup at the stove, while his almost 4-year-old daughter ran by in a giraffe suit yelling "pasta," and his pregnant wife laughed from the couch with her feet up on a stool. He was not the same man he had been the night he stepped in to rescue her on Maple Street. He was, in every way that counted, more. He stirred the soup. He listened to his life happening behind him. He smiled. Leave your comment and share this story with someone special. It truly helps us keep bringing new stories to you. And if you want to follow every chapter of this emotional journey, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Your support makes all the difference.